Coterie Creation, an in-depth look at Coterie Creation and Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. The coterie is the most important part of the chronicle. Everything revolves around the coterie, so having the players build the coterie together is essential to having a successful game. This is where storytellers get an understanding where the players are wanting to go with the game. Players are definitely not going to make up a bourgeois and a gangrel and leading street gangs and wanting to be in a Camarilla game. Coterie points. The coterie begins the game with a pool of 1 coterie point for every member, and each member is allowed to donate an advantage point to this pool as well. With these points, they can buy coterie backgrounds, and these backgrounds that are used by the coterie as a whole. I usually have a group of about 4+ players, currently 7, but if I had a coterie of less than 4, I would definitely allow them 2 points per person just to add to this coterie pool. Coterie specific background. Domain. This is a specific part of the city that the coterie can hunt that is theirs. Camarilla coteries have domains that the prince grants to them that they protect in the prince's name. Anarchs coteries have turf that they earn and that the baron or other leaders of that territory agree that they can have because they have earned it. Each domain has traits dedicated to it, which are Chase. This trait describes 2 parts of the coterie's domain. The first is how good of a hunting ground the coterie's domain is. Chase gives a default difficulty of 6 to hunting rolls within their domain, and each dot purchased lowers that difficulty by 1. Chase also refers to the abstract physical size of the domain. Chase geographical equivalent is listed on this chart. In creating Chase for a domain, look at like you would a small area like the rack, has rich hunting but a small area, or same feeding availability but a larger area. Everything can affect the game. A larger area could become more work, but then again, it all depends on what kind of chronicle the players are wanting. Lean. This describes how familiar the characters are with their domain. Are they able to locate things within their domain easily? Can they go to the corner liquor store and just chat up with the workers? Each dot in lean adds 1 dice to pools during activities where knowing your domain is important, with exception to hunting rules. Portillion. This trait describes how secure a domain is. If anyone is coming into your domain and attempting anything at all within it, they take a dice penalty equal to the number of dots in Portillion. This does not apply to your haven, just the domain. So, if a Ventru comes into your domain trying to discover something about your coterie, they are penalized dice as they attempt to question people to locate you. But if, on the other hand, they discover your haven, they will not be penalized per Portillion to enter your haven unless you have security set up for your haven itself. Can you even have a game without domain? Well, of course you can, but it definitely is not an ideal situation. Hunting has normal rolls, so there is a higher risk of failure, and having a haven in or very close to another's domain could lead to problems of their own. I would highly suggest dropping a point in a domain just to build upon it later, if you can, of course, unless the storyteller has some plot point in mind for your coterie. Coterie backgrounds. Most backgrounds can be used as a coterie background. This means the same rules apply as it does for the personal background. Please see my other videos on how these work, of course. An example is Herd. Herd 1 is 3 members and allows for 1 hunger per week to be slated. So, a single coterie member would be able to access the coterie herd and slate 1 hunger per week. Also, as a coterie member, each member of the herd would know the entire coterie. So, if your coterie were to take contact or ally, they would know everyone that is part of the coterie, so as all of them could access that resource when needed. Retainer. Now this is a tricky coterie background, but I'll tell you how I get around it. So at 1 dot, Retainer is a loyal mortal, but at 2 or 3 dots, they are a ghoul. Now ghouling necessarily isn't the issue, because it's just a drink from a kindred. But to bond a retainer would bond the retainer to just 1 member of the coterie. At that point, the retainer would favor the regnant over the others in the coterie. This means that as the coterie background, each would have to vow to never bond the retainer, or there would be a definite show of favoritism that could affect the coterie at some point. Coterie flaws. One of the cool things is that coteries are not required to purchase flaws, but if they decide to, they get points spent on the flaw to spend elsewhere. So if the coterie decides to purchase a 2-point flaw, shunned, for example, they would add 2 points to their coterie pool total to spend elsewhere. Coterie types. There is a huge list of coterie types that your group can choose from. I use this as a place to start ideas where the coterie is wanting to go. It's very possible that they spend their points and want a coterie type that they do not have the points in the right place, or are shy a couple points. I allow them to take the points anyway in this game. I just tell them that the XP is spent. They have to purchase it when they fulfill their coterie type first, and then they can spend on whatever they like afterwards. To me, this is a good show of them working towards building the coterie the way they want it, and of course I follow all of my background rules when doing so, and write it into the game when new things are purchased. Coterie Oath. When Anarch coteries are built, they are usually just together for a matter of survival. They make their own private pact as a show of loyalty to one another. Now the Camarilla has a big show of oath, publicly displayed before the prince. The Coterie Oath is a binding between each member to one another no matter their clan. Along with this, they are forbidden to blood bond with one another. Each member of the coterie is responsible for the actions of the other members, and they are also judged together. They also have to make a haven together away from their sires. As a coterie, they are expected to come when called to defend and protect the Camarilla. For the Camarilla, this is what happens when a new vampire is released. Their sire's responsibility is done, and now the child is taken into the coterie to prove itself. The coterie is assigned a shadow, whose job it is to advise the coterie in loyalty. This job is not the same as Mala, but definitely could be if the coterie bought Coterie Mala and named the shadow. The shadow is chosen by the prince and will tattle on the coterie as often as aid them. The one thing that I love about the Coterie Oath is that it shows the loyalty to tradition and keeps players focused. If a single character is a troublemaker, it will not be long before they are reprimanded by their coterie mates, as they do not wish to be condemned for the same actions. Who would want the shadow writing to the prince and tell him that a member of the coterie broke rules and the rest of the coterie just followed along? Now, if one falls, they all fall. In an Anarch game, a similar thing can be done with their pact, and I highly suggest doing something very similar to that to make things more exciting for the Anarchs. I hope that you liked this video and were able to learn something new, or at the very least got some ideas to try in your own games.